When auditions weren't enough to fill the pantry, he made a decision that would break his soul, selling his dog for a couple of meals. That night, amid silence and guilt, he swore never again to improvise with destiny. He began to write about someone he knew well, an ordinary man, beaten by routine and luck, a neighborhood loser who refuses to stay underground. He wasn't a showcase hero. He was one of us. He was Rocky Balboa. What you're about to hear, it's not a miracle. It's a process. From an empty fridge and countless "you're not the type" to an Oscar won with a cheap film, written against the clock, and held up by an idea once thought impossible, that a lovable loser could touch the world. In the end, we'll be left with a lesson that has followed him ever since. A lesson about what to do when life is harder than you do. Stallone, also known as Sly, was born in 1946 in New York. At birth, a complicated delivery with forceps damaged the facial nerve. From then on, his drooping lip and speech would become a trademark and obstacle. He was born facing the wind. Neither his mother nor his father knew how to be nursed. At home, there were no models, only cross signals. The context of his arrival and some faults of his upbringing pushed him to see things differently. He grew deep, rough, uncommon. He grew amid arguments, moves, and a tough neighborhood. Without knowing it, his future was taking root in his present. Later, he would bring that wound to celluloid, putting in Rocky one of his father's cruelest phrases and letting his childhood trauma seep into the script as a ghostly father figure. You weren't born with a brain, so you'd better develop your body. At the age of 11, his parents split, and he would divide his days between the straight countryside with his father and the uncertainty of Philadelphia with his mother. Between those two contrasts, the one showing a glimmer of light was the countryside, where he shared a love for polo with his father. Until one afternoon, his father knocked him off the horse in front of everyone, extinguishing the small flame of a stable bond and marking him for years. That scene would stay in his mind for the rest of his life and become the breaking point of his rebellion and military schooling. In the following years, Stallone would hardly be a model student. He shot down car hood ornaments with lead pellets, painted the house black, turning it into shadow, shot arrows from the classroom window, and once jumped from the roof with an umbrella, breaking his arm. He was expelled from 13 schools. He ended up in boarding schools, a military academy, and a center for troubled teens. Stallone didn't apologize for what he did. He apologized for what he was about to do. He understood very early that in this world there are no heroes nor villains, only people with different agendas. So when the time came to hide, Stallone found refuge in cinema, imitating his heroes in the mirror and repeating their lines until exhaustion. He went on like that, finding shelter in uncharted territory until, little by little, he began to crave a stronger drink. And the drink came with Steve Reeves' Hercules, a film that obsessed him. Strength, will, and destiny would become the trio that followed him for life. He began looking for copper and found gold, finding refuge where others only seek distraction. In 1965, he set up for Switzerland and enrolled in the American College of Switzerland in Leysin. There, under the timid stage lights, he discovered that by acting he could say what until now he hadn't been able to express. He debuted with Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, and immediately noticed that path made his younger self jump in his seat. Right there, with his pulse still trembling, he told himself, "This is it. I finally did something right. I'm going for it." After his time in Switzerland, Stallone returned to his country with more drive than certainty, and, while stringing together odd jobs, he adopted Woodgoose, a large, calm dog who eased his loneliness amid corridors and failures. In New York, he faced a city that granted no miracles, a city that barely lets you breathe. With empty pockets and an eviction on his shoulders, he turned the Port Authority bus terminal into his bedroom for nearly 3 weeks. On that razor's edge of survival came a casting notice, suspicious but possible, and opened a slit of light. That slit was the 1970 film The Poirier Kitty and Studs, his first leading role, $200, and an unorthodox beginning. Years later, once Stallone was on top, the film was renamed Italian Stallion to ride Rocky's fame. There were attempts at extortion, but Stallone firmly refused, saying he wouldn't give them even $2 because the film wasn't even worth that much. In New York, between auditions and survival jobs, came the need to take some cheap headshots. That's how he met Sasha, a young photographer who captured actors in a tiny studio with white walls and a cold light. The conversation stretched on. They repeated shot after shot, and through nervous laughter, they began to see each other outside the studio. To stay afloat, they rowed against the current. Sasha balancing a tray, Stallone romping from job to job with the same line in the credits of each one. "Thank you for your services." He tasted the cold of the dogs, the edge of the fitted knife, the door of a bouncer, the dusk of a bookstore, and even the stench of a freshly scrubbed Lionsgate. His favorite job was at the movie theater box office. From there, he could watch films for free, over and over again. He would dismantle the plots, hunt for the instant where a character reveals himself, and fill notebooks with his notes. Eventually, he was fired for selling his tickets, but that dim room with a notebook was his secret workshop, where he began forging the writer and director inside him, at a time when he still doubted his own voice as an actor and sucked, through ink, something to tell the world. In 1974, he married Sasha, and together they decided to head for sunny California to try and conquer Hollywood. But reality was harsh. There was no work, and the pantry stayed empty as the pregnancy advanced. Then came a decision that broke his heart: selling vodkas for $60 to eat and pay the rent. That day, with crumbled bills in hand, he made a simple but fierce promise. If an opportunity appeared, he would never let it go. Even so, auditions were a catalog of rejections. "You're not the type. Your voice doesn't work. We're looking for another face." He carried on like that until he managed to sneak in as an extra in a Woody Allen film, and shortly after took part in The Lords of Flatbush, a film where he dared to improvise, to shape rhythms, silences, and gestures, discovering something decisive: you can shape the script through acting. After the moderately successful Lords of Flatbush, Stallone still could take off. He stubbornly went to auditions, but nothing clicked. Even at the Godfather casting, where they planned to recruit about 100 Italian-looking men, he didn't land a thing. Fortunately, by the mid-1970s, cinema began to change. The image of the perfect hero cracked open and a realistic wave emerged. Stallone understood there was a space for a lovable loser, so he sat down to write. The idea had been chasing him for some time, but he couldn't decide on the main character or the central conflict. There were many ideas, but nothing concrete. Then one day, in 1975, when Sly went to watch the epic fight between champion Muhammad Ali and Chuck Wepner for the heavyweight title, the spark struck. According to Stallone, Chuck didn't look like a boxer at all. He was terribly clumsy and awkward, like a punching bag with eyes. Then, suddenly something incredible happened. Out of nowhere, Chuck knocked down the immortal Ali. That's Chuck Stallone. He now had his premise and the image to shape his character. The rest was just a matter of technique. At first, he created Rocky as a rough, dark guy. Later, he rewrote him as a man of flesh and doubts, insecure but relatable, a neighborhood man anyone could greet on the street. He locked himself up and typed non-stop for 3 days, emerging with a first draft. He took it to producers, and the offer came quickly: $300,000, but with one condition: he couldn't star in it. Still with an empty fridge, he said no and turned down the deal. That script wasn't merchandise. It was a story told with boxing gloves. He would stay firm in his decision, even if he had to keep defending himself with his own face. In the end, the producers gave in. There would be a movie, with a tight budget, a straight schedule, and Stallone at the lead. So when the contract was still warm, he went to close the one that hurt the most: bringing Butkus back. He found the man who bought him and explained that things have changed, that he finally had a movie in motion. The man didn't blink. $3,000, and here's yours again. Of course, Stallone didn't have that kind of money, so he made the only offer he could. If the man returned the dog, he'd give him a small role in the film. There were no more speeches, just a handshake, a deal sealed, and Butkus once again slept at the foot of his bed. We move to the set, where action is finally heard, and Rocky Balboa collects debts in Philadelphia while fighting in Forgotten Rings. A publicity stunt puts him face to face with the champion Apollo Creed. Mikey squeezes him dry in the gym while Adrian opens her heart. In the mid-locker, his fist beat time against the hanging meat. Then comes the big night. He falls, gets up, insists. The scorecard says defeat by decision. The crowd says something else. He doesn't win the belt, but wins the people. The premiere was in New York. At the event, Stallone stayed in the back, almost hidden, watching the film through the audience reactions. And then it happened. Rocky sends Apollo to the canvas and the theater explodes. Seats spring up, arms rise high, a roar that seems to come straight from the ring itself. What followed was an unstoppable wave, word of mouth, sold-out screenings, a box office surpassing $160 million, and a cultural phenomenon in motion. The season culminated on Oscar night. The envelope opened, and the phrase hit like a bell. Best Picture for Rocky. They called him to the stage and he, without embellishment, left a single line that became legend. Thank you to all the Rockies of the world. After Rocky, Stallone would discover that success doesn't only dazzle, it also makes you dizzy. He felt the vertigo of expectations and stumbled early. Fist failed to connect, and Paradise Alley took a beating from critics. Soon the noise of applause faded and fear appeared, along with whispers in the industry saying, Stallone was just a flash in the pan. He could have stepped back, but chose the opposite, to write and direct Rocky II. He went back to the beginning, crafting a more intimate story, the doubt, the pressure of a famous name, a growing family, the temptation to retire, and gave us the rematch we all wanted to see. In Rocky II, we see a sequel with less glitter and more daily life. Bills to pay, kitchen conversations, the weight of expectations, and of course, the fight that closes the circle. The audience responded. The sequel not only worked, it proved that when there's truth behind the character, a continuation can move us as much as the beginning. While Rocky had already become a phenomenon, First Blood, Rambo arrived, the story of a veteran wandering without destination, discovering that civil peace can be more hostile than war. Rambo is a soldier who no longer fits in calmness. He arrives in a small town. They look at him like excess, they push him, and he responds from a wound that never heals. Stallone understood that Rambo didn't need speeches. He stripped away the lines, left only gestures, breathing and gaze. When he read the original ending, the character said, he stood firm and asked to change it, so Rambo would live. Not out of vanity, but because that broken man deserved another chance. Stallone chose an upper wound over a tombstone, and that choice, that silence loaded with meaning, that economy of words, connected with millions who saw in Rambo more than a soldier. They saw someone trying to keep walking. A couple of years later, the double punch of Rocky IV and Rambo II placed him at the top of commercial cinema. Overflowing box offices, posters all over the world, and a name that became synonymous with action. In that climate, the industry put him into an inevitable rivalry with Schwarzenegger, while he tested other tones with thrillers and action comedies, seeking not to repeat himself. Away from the spotlight, he tried to repair a story he had shelved. He returned to Polo to share the field with his father, perhaps imagining another ending, one told with the body instead of words. But in the middle of the match, his father struck him again, this time from behind and with the cameras rolling. That day alarm was drawn, returning him to the original wound. Stallone wouldn't argue anymore. He sold the horses, disbanded the team, and stepped away from that world. That decision lacked the roar of his movies, but it weighed more than any blow his characters took. That decision was the old way of saying enough. Stallone understood that sometimes the real winning punch isn't the one you throw, it's the one you refuse to take again. In '97, when many had already tied him to the stereotype of the invincible hero, Copeland appeared and surprised the industry. Suddenly, the least obvious role was the one that fit him best, a low-budget crime drama directed by James Mangold. There, waiting for him were De Niro, Harvey Keitel, and Ray Liotta, all lighthouses on a night highway. Sly agreed to beat off his usual pattern, for the first time in his career, gained nearly 40 pounds, with the patience of someone sculpting a statue in reverse, as if putting on a lead armor to speak more slowly and with more truth. In Copeland, Stallone turned down the volume of the muscles and turned up the one from silence. He was a more vulnerable, restrained Stallone, one who let breath and doubt tell what once his fist had told. He played a small-town cop with a worn-out gaze and a contained pulse. Fewer explosions, more humanity. The risk echoed at the end of the road. Stockholm called his name and handed him the award for Best Actor, proving that to paint well, you must use the whole palette, not just the colors you like. Then came the slumps of the 2000s, projects that didn't ignite and noise without echo. His response wasn't to shout louder, but to return to the origin with a new light. He came back with Rocky Balboa in 2006, an intimate film about time, grief, and dignity. And 2 years later, with Rambo in 2008, raw and direct. In Rocky Balboa, he left his grit carved in marble. It's not about how hard you hit, but how much you endure and keep moving forward. He didn't leave a slogan, he left a survival manual. Stallone thought of creating Rocky Balboa after realizing, following Rocky V, that the film no longer belonged to him nor to the audience. So he decided to force Rocky Balboa, convinced it would be his final round, and that this time, every punch would land where it should. Of course, many well-intentioned critics read the film as a mirror of Sly's own downward curve, a chronicle of a tired champion clinging to a last ticket and accepting a fight, maybe lost, against the next generation. But Stallone showed once again he wasn't to be written off by age or form, because Rocky Balboa, like that first Rocky, was, above all, the one he felt most his own. When Balboa arrived in 2006, Sly reignited the scream from the edge of oblivion. The film served as a dignified final curtain for his hero, a clean farewell, with Rocky leaving the ring with his head held high. According to the story, Rocky, now without Adrian, opened a small restaurant named after her, finding a modest peace among tables and memories. But on the horizon appeared Mason Dixon, young and hungry, played by the real boxer Antonio Tarver, and signed for a world title fight. Unlike the latest entries, Sly, choreographer of the ring, chose less stage fight, almost unscripted, real balls before the camera, raw exchanges between Stallone and Tarver. The cost, at least one knockout for Sly. When the movie premiered, it blew up the box office, an explosion that outshone the previous 3 installments, and this time, critics didn't haggle praises. Sly's performance in Balboa was celebrated as the summit of the entire Rocky saga. After Rocky Balboa, life, the one that doesn't follow a script, hit harder than any rival in the ring. First, his father passed away. Stallone visited him in his final days. There were words, unfinished accounts, and a faint truth sealed with the phrase, "You should learn to love and forgive people." The farewell left behind a mix of old anger and a timid peace barely starting to show. Soon after, when it seemed pain had found its place, came a hug to the liver. The death of Sage, his eldest son, at only 36. There are no awards or applause big enough for that. And yet, something in him had already been decided long before. He would not repeat the story. Raised amid violence and absences, he understood that death is hereditary. It comes for us all. So he chose to break the cycle, to be present, to support, to accompany his family. He chose to be another kind of father, to work together, to create projects, to open doors, to place his body and affection where once there had been silence. In 2015, he returned to the universe that made him eternal, no longer as a champion seeking his place, but as Adonis' mentor in Creed. His performance moved both audience and critics. The following year, he won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor and earned another Oscar nomination. Stallone savored this project. There was something strange and fascinating in creating side by side with a director and co-star who were twice his youth. Born long after Rocky IV was shaping Creed, Sly followed the thread of what Rocky could become, and along the way, found what that old warrior still meant to him. For this film, Stallone chose not to alter the score. Tastes change, and cinema learns a new grammar with every shift in ideology, politics, and life. What once drew a bravo might now be untouchable. Sly stayed on his shore, polishing only his own lines. After all, who knows Rocky Balboa better than him? There was veteran advice, yes, and professional wings for the director's helm, but the real treasure came through his acting. A Rocky with new layers, tenacious outside the ring, firm in domestic drama, and braving his most personal fight, the fight against illness. After the incredible success of Creed, producers quickly planned to turn the idea into a franchise and started working on its sequel, Creed II, released in 2018. For this film, they brought back an old thread from Rocky. The son of Ivan Drago, Apollo Creed's gangman, Ronnie's father and Rocky's friend, steps into the same ring as Donnie. When youth faces youth, the old enemies, Rocky and the elder Drago, stand behind them, each in his corner. Two schools that never touch, two ways of living, two worlds. The echo of that old climax returns, rhyming within the saga. But this time, it's Ivan who pulls the lever. He stops the fight to save his son, above his own hunger and pride. That was Stallone's last appearance as an actor in the Creed saga, but Sly didn't stop there. He lent his voice to the lovable King Shark in Squad in 2021, and upset, he kept painting, joining charity auctions, and supporting social causes. Outside the cameras, he also launched several ventures, among them the founding of Planet Hollywood. It was in 1991 that he lit his own planet. Sly, Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis became co-owners of the Planet Hollywood chain of restaurants and resorts. The first beacon opened in New York, and the buzz of movie stars served as capital and megaphone. With the silhouette of a star as its emblem, the idea grew into a constellation, no longer just tables and displays, but hotels, resorts, and casinos orbiting its name. Today his fortune reaches the hundreds of millions, but the balance that truly matters is another. He left behind a simple first creed: anyone can get back on their feet. Stallone became famous for playing tough men, but what truly held us on the other side of the screen wasn't the muscles, it was the heart beating underneath. Rocky wasn't an impeccable hero. He came up short at the end of the month, he doubted, he made mistakes, and still went out to train. That's exactly why we felt close to him. The lesson isn't about invincibility, it's about direction. The hits come from life, from work, from loss, but the script is written by what you do next. You're not the impact you took, you're the step you take after that. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and share it. In the Ori series, I'll keep telling stories like that of Sylvester Stallone. Who should we talk about next?